Hello and welcome again. We're so thrilled you're here tonight for our debut episode of CGN Live Career, How You Can Jumpstart Your Future Now. In both the college and career journey, you hear a lot about passions and interests. What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? In the next hour, we're going to talk about both of these and also fold in a third aspect, aptitudes. Aptitudes essentially are natural abilities in a given area as opposed to a skill you can learn. If you're a high school student here tonight, because you're probably wanting to know what aptitudes fit you best, we hope that you recognize that some of these aptitudes are already baked in, but you might not know it yet. Over the course of the fall, we're going to dig into career exploration with 3 programs that was earlier mentioned. And just to mark your calendars, on November 3rd, we're going to explore skills, what experts see as the most important skills for employment in the future and how you can develop some of those skills now. And then finally, in December 1st, we're going to talk about jobs and specifically how experts are helping young people learn about their options and find role models where they can find all kinds of fields of interest. Here tonight, I'm super excited with our 2 experts that are really going to dig deep into aptitudes and helping us all understand tonight how we can understand those and align our interests. With me tonight is Edson Barton, again, the founder and CEO of YouScience. Edson will explain YouScience and how it can uncover aptitudes and how students can use that knowledge to find relevant career pathways. I'm excited to hear about that, Edson. And Mallory Becraft is the Associate Director of Career Coaching and Campus Partnerships at the Pomerantz Career Center at the University of Iowa, where she has guided thousands of undergraduates, and probably, Mallory, some of my students I'm sure you've guided through the same discussions we'll be having today. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Before we get started, we just want to remind you to please drop any questions that you have in the Q&A button on your Zoom display. We will try to get to as many questions as we can, so there's a lot of content we want to cover. But in the meantime, can you please just drop in where you're from? We just are curious about who our audience is tonight. If you're a high school student, parent, counselor, we're all trying to figure out maybe other careers or aptitudes that we're not aware of. I'm excited to learn more about these baked in aptitudes. So take a minute to do that. And then as we get started, we really want to make sure that you walk away tonight with not only a newfound interest and understanding of aptitudes, but also some resources and tools. So please make sure that you're checking the chat room so that you can access those links. Edson, again, thank you so much for being here. CEO and developer of YouScience. Obviously, you have a deep-hearted interest in aptitudes. So I'd love to kick off tonight with you and explaining how does someone get interested in the whole topic and make their career into aptitudes and vocation?
Well, from a standpoint of how do we leverage aptitudes to really find our careers, and really that passion is at the heart of what we do, and really the passion and the heart of what I've built my career on. I'll take one second to just say I did this because I struggled as an individual, as do most of us, the vast majority of people, trying to understand who we are and what we should really be doing. And aptitudes is a great way to help focus an individual on their core strengths rather than some lacking understanding of what I might or might not be interested in based on my exposure.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, Mallory, we're very familiar with that, with the students we work with are always asking that very question. So let's Mallory, if you could talk to like why students come to you and what is that appeal to assessments? Why do they say, I need an assessment to help figure out what I might want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think students come to me and will often say, "Isn't there just some test I can take? How can I figure this out?" And it isn't that simple, but I understand the desire. I think we're all craving objective information. We all understandably want to know ourselves better. And it can be really hard to know what you're good at or what you're interested in at this season of life. Students are making career decisions, but they haven't had a lot of career exposure. They haven't had a lot of work experience. And so there isn't a crystal ball. We don't have this magic wand, but a good assessment can help us uncover some of our blind spots and increase our self awareness and hopefully provide some insight and validation.
Right. And I feel YouScience definitely brings that piece of aptitude, and we'll definitely be sharing some other assessment tools that we're all familiar with. But Edson, can you talk a little more about what makes YouScience so unique in the fact that it helps students understand that baked in aptitude? If you could just define aptitudes a little more for us.
Yeah, you bet. Aptitudes, a good way of understanding aptitudes is that they are our inherent talents. They're the things that come inside of us and aren't influenced really that much by our environment. And that's really critical because everything else around us, our interests and even our personalities, get influenced pretty dramatically by our environment. Aptitudes are something that is kind of baked into each one of us. It's what makes each one of us unique and special in so many ways. And for us, it's really that idea that every single person has really amazing talents to give to the world. But a lot of times they don't understand that because we too often identify talents are the things that we actually have skill in. And skill and aptitudes are something kind of different. If I could just elaborate, an aptitude is very similar to your dominant and non-dominant hand. So all of us have that recognition of that dominance in our usage of our hands. When you use your dominant hand as an example, you actually learn things quicker with that hand. You can write your name faster, you can draw or do different things with it in a much better way. And actually, as you're using it, it doesn't require that much brain power to accomplish something. However, on the other hand, if you're using your non-dominant hand to try to do those simple tasks like write your name, it's very frustrating to us, right? You start to use this mechanism and it just doesn't feel right to you. And it's not that you can't learn it or you can't do it with your non-dominant hand, but it requires a tremendous amount of mental energy and power to actually accomplish that task. So now if we relate that back to those natural talents that we have in all different areas, we can start to see that while we try to study one thing in school, for example, and it just doesn't come to us like it does to our peers. And a lot of times that's not because of our environment or our backgrounds, because it's our natural abilities to do those types of skills. So what we're really trying to focus on is helping somebody identify those natural, powerful talents that they have and focus and bring those to life in how they relate to their studies and to ultimately their career.
Right. And I think exactly what we were just saying, Mallory, is so many of our students come to us and say, help us understand our major. What is the career? They're really looking for that answer where, Edson, can you even explain a little more as far as what are the aptitude categories? Like what are the results and where would those fall into what categories that students could identify with?
Yeah, you bet. It's interesting. That's a great question because so many of us will identify talent as, well, you're good musically, or you can draw, or you're good at sports, or, you're even good at math. But aptitudes are kind of a layer deeper than that because those are skills that can be learned with applied application, right? Just doing them over and over. But an aptitude has things like idea generation, numerical reasoning, sequential reasoning, time frame orientation. All of those different things are how you perceive the world and internalize that. Now, on top of that, for example, if I'm good at numerical reasoning, for example, a skill on top of that might be accountancy. So I can build on those natural talents into the skill areas that actually help me understand this particular work better. And that's one reason why we have people who are really great at being accountants or being engineers or being a welder or being somebody who works well with people. It's because of these natural abilities that are underneath all of that.
I mean, I know I definitely know one of my aptitudes is not numerical reasoning. So I think too, we want to mention again, YouScience is one of many tools. And Edson, thank you to you and your YouScience team for offering 50% off to everybody that was able to join us tonight. So don't forget to access that code. If you're a student who really wants to identify and see where your aptitudes are. And as we know, YouScience measures these fascinating aptitudes, but Mallory, can you even switch gears? And we know that a lot of these aptitudes, just like Edson had mentioned, equate to specific majors and careers.
Mhm.
And those kind of fall into a totally separate category. ACTE defines 14 career clusters, which is a lot for students to understand and absorb. So anything from working with people, like Edson mentioned, health careers, agriculture, transportation. Mallory, can you explain that a little more in depth and exactly what those clusters mean for students and understanding that?
Absolutely. I think self-awareness always needs to be that first step, but then exploring the career clusters can be a great action item from that point. So instead of helping students think through, what do I want to be when I grow up? Or what can I do with this certain major? I really want students to think about, what is a work environment that interests you? Or what are some of the job duties you think you'd be good at? What are some of the problems you want to help solve? So in my role at the University of Iowa, I specialize in helping students interested in healthcare careers. So I will often have students who say, I know I want to help people, and I think the human body is fascinating. Great. That's awesome data. That's a great place to start. However, there are so many healthcare careers. So we can look within this health science cluster and narrow and define, what route is going to be best for you. Do you want to work on the front lines? Do you want to work more behind the scenes? How do you feel about blood and guts? How do you feel about an advanced degree? And so by exploring a job cluster, looking at some of those pathways, we're able to narrow and focus as we go. So much about career coaching really is supporting folks through that overwhelm. And so if we're able to look first at clusters, then at pathways, then at specific jobs, it's going to be easier to explore our options and minimize the overwhelm of it.
Yeah, and I think we all can agree I feel so much has changed in just career development. I think so many times students just want to choose. Again, they want that answer, but it's truly exploring so many options. And just like you mentioned, there's thousands of opportunities alone in the medical career, other than what most students relate to nursing or doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I see a lot of my students too, just over so many years, that really couldn't connect what they were learning into how that could equate to their potential aptitudes and how that related to future majors and careers. And Edson, I know you have some fascinating opinions and thoughts about relevance, and I am truly so fascinated by that, because I feel like a lot of times students are only aware of what they're exposed to. So could you explain a little more about relevance and what that means specifically for high school students with course choices, and what they're exposed to during their high school years to really understand career pathways?
Yeah, you bet. I think one of the things I'll relate it to what you were talking about just before is, a student might have some interest in the healthcare field, but what they don't understand is that their aptitudes don't align maybe with direct patient care. But to understand that the world of the healthcare profession, for example, is much, much broader than just being patient care. I can be in accounting in a hospital. I can be working on medical equipment that is saving people's lives. I can be working on the air conditioning systems that actually make it feasible for somebody to be in a sustainable environment in a hospital, right? All of those things are actually part of the healthcare community. And so the relevance factor actually is part of that, but it also goes down into our education. One of the things that we don't do very well as an educational community is help students understand that what I'm learning today actually is beneficial for a particular role or job. And unfortunately, when a student says, why am I learning this? That is a question that's universal. Every student at some point has asked that question. But what they're really asking there is, can you please tell me and make what I'm studying today relevant to what I want to do in the future? And one, if they don't know what they want to do, of course, it makes it very hard to do that. But then two, if you're teaching about a particular subject and they don't understand how to make that relevant, then you've lost the student. And in our school systems today, and every single one of us have felt this at some point, but Gallup has done some tremendous research that's shown that less than 60% of our population, or over 60%, I should say, are disengaged in their education. And that disengagement, when you ask students why they're disengaged, it comes down to this simple question, right? I don't know why I'm here. And so if we can make education more relevant today, it sets students up tremendously well for their entire future. And it changes their academic outlook completely.
Right. Yeah, that sense of purpose. And I feel too, when students engage and really understand, like you mentioned, what they're learning equates to just any potential career, really, in the end, right? How many of us really stayed on the stream of what we wanted to do? So I appreciate that as much exposure as they can get will help them. So I wanted to chat a little bit about that as well. I feel so many times high school students feel, if I'm good at math, I should go into engineering. If I care for people, Mallory, that means healthcare. Or if I don't know what I want to do, that might mean psychology or business. So many students are limited in their information. So, Edson, if you could explain a little more too about that exposure, like how do we expose students to more careers and an understanding of what's out there? If they are interested in medical careers, how do they identify what else is out there?
Yeah, you talked about the relevance gap, and that's one big problem, but it starts actually with this question of the exposure gap. And exposure has to do with how you view the world. One of the things that is really hard for a large community of educators looking at students is saying, how do we actually expose them to more things? Because as a young person in particular, but this is true of adults as well, we have blinders on. And those blinders are kind of put on us based on what we've been exposed to in our environment. So if I come from a well-rounded, wealthy family, I may have doctors, I may have engineers, I may have other professionals in my life that I can see. And so my world then actually has those blinders on of that is what world of work looks like. But if I come from a modest environment, socioeconomic environment, and I don't have exposure to some of those professional careers, I have the same blinders on, but they're just blinders in a different area. So I may only see certain types of work coming from those around me. So one of the real benefits of looking at aptitudes versus any other way of helping students be exposed to potential careers is we can look deep inside somebody and say, okay, here's the nature of who you are. Let's open up your aperture of potential careers that are related to those skill sets that you have versus your very limited view of the world based on your interests, based on your current exposure to the world, and other factors. So by doing that, and again, looking at aptitudes as a starting point of opening your exposure up, your aperture, excuse me, it really helps that exposure be well-rounded. And now as a student it's not giving them necessarily all the choices in the world, but it's saying, here's choices that best fit you. Now let's find how those relate to your interests, your personality, and those other things that Mallory was talking about before that round you out as a person and help give purpose and meaning to what you're doing.
Right. And yeah, and exactly. So Mallory, I would love to hear your thoughts as to, students have been exposed to more, or maybe they just aren't during high school. So then what happens when they get to the college campus? Like, what are some things that you do to support students in discovering their pathways and help nurture them into discovering those?
Absolutely. And I feel like I relate to this. I grew up in a small rural town with one stoplight. There weren't a lot of careers to see. I knew what my family did. I saw the careers that I saw on TV and careers that felt, famous or special. And so it is really important that we help students discover their pathways and explore so many different careers that are out there. And so when I'm chatting with a student, there is time for us to be reflective, to spend some time looking at maybe some online resources. But then you can only think about something for so long, and it comes time to doing something about it. So career development is a verb. I need to encourage students to really get out there. We test drive a car before we buy it, or we look at an apartment before we lease it. So we need as much data as possible. You need to experience something as closely as you can before you're making major career decisions. So to really help nurture students in their career exploration, I want them to get out there, go find a part-time job, do some volunteer work that's meaningful for you, seek out an internship or a job shadowing experience, help out in a research study. Because after you do something like that, it's unlikely that you're still going to feel neutral. It's going to move the needle one way or the other. You're either going to be more excited about something, or you're going to realize it wasn't for you. And either way, that's really incredible data for us to have. Then go try something new and reflect. Try something different, reflect. Figuring out what you like, what you don't like, that's going to increase your confidence.
Diane, can I add something to that?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Mallory is absolutely right. And the best time to really start doing that is early on. I always encourage people, once you understand your aptitudes and your interests a little bit better, then go and apply for a job in a field that you think is interesting. And whether that's really honestly being a janitor, but you're being a janitor at an aerospace engineering firm, right? Because you think that's what you want to do. Go into that and see how that works. Or take a class in manufacturing or engineering and see, because that's the time to really explore. By the time you get to college, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars, and you don't want that time to be the time where you're trying to figure it out. Try to do that earlier in life and get as much exposure as you possibly can. You can switch jobs as a high school student multiple times and really try to get that exposure in so many different areas. Even if it's not a job, try an internship, try just job shadowing different people. It's amazing how many people want to help young people find their way in life. They really are open to those opportunities. We just don't ask enough, right? As young people.
Yeah, and there's one question in here that I think is interesting as far as the exploring the aptitudes. Edson, do you feel like, and Mallory, do you even see a lot of common majors or even aptitudes that more people have results in? Like, are there areas that you feel, there's some blind spots and we need more students of, or are there just a lot of aptitudes that are broadly shared?
I'll answer that from a general perspective and from the science that we see. And I'd love to hear Mallory's response from kind of feet on the street, seeing how that plays out with students right there in the college. There isn't one aptitude that dominates more than others. However, what we do see is a tremendous amount of students that find that they actually have these natural talents and aptitudes for things that they hadn't thought of before. Because our interests really put those blinders on, we tend to self-limit ourselves, and so our natural biases come in very strong. So what we actually see is that a group of people tend to move to more higher skill type of level jobs, so engineering jobs, construction, high construction jobs like road engineering, those types of things. We see more people shifting to not just patient care, but lab analysis or chemistry types of positions. Where that really starts to show is in the difference between, you see females and minority students that have limited their vision of who they are. And now you start to open that up, and we see a tremendous shift of young women going into those high science fields and those high engineering fields where they never would have gone there before, because they didn't feel like previously that that was the world for them. And now they see, oh my word, I actually have talent in that area. I always thought that I did, but now some science is actually proving that to me. And so we see more people moving that direction.
Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of it and what I'm hearing from everyone is that it's okay to try different things. That helps us learn. And I think a lot of us, and even in the audience tonight, could say we've tried many jobs, many jobs. So Mallory, I'm curious to, in thinking of the student who sets foot on your campus and maybe still doesn't know, I think that's such a stressful piece for a lot of the high school students I work with, is they really feel like they need to figure this out. And, Edson, you're sharing that those aptitudes can change. So Mallory, what do you say to students who really don't know, and what if they change their major? Or, what are some of the barriers or benefits to changing majors, or can they change a major once they're on campus?
Absolutely. So certainly the more career exploration you can do, I don't think anyone's ever regretted doing a lot of career exploration as soon as possible. And that being said, like, life happens and you're going to change your mind and things are going to unfold for you. And high school science isn't like college science, just as an example, sometimes. So I lovingly joke that on campus, it looks like everybody has it all figured out until they come to my office. And then I see the reality that, it's normal to question what you want to do or to explore. So I always want to help nurture a culture of exploration. It is really common to change your major. It is really common to start out as an open or exploratory major. And I want to really validate that for folks and say, I applaud you for being vulnerable and for being honest. And it's hard to say, I don't know, but that's truthful and that's powerful and it can get better. So it is okay if you're starting college and you just want to explore all your options. It's okay if you have a major picked out and you change your mind. I think as young people, especially, just the more opportunities you can be open to and explore, that's going to set you up for success as best as possible, because the world of work is just changing at a pace that today's college students are going to be doing so many jobs that don't even exist yet. And so dealing with some ambiguity, being open-minded to different things, I think is going to serve you well as you're making major decisions, but also later on in your career as well. I changed my major. I lived to tell the tale. It's really common, and it's not something to fear.
And it can be done. It's okay to change your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say too, if one of the worst things that happens in the economy is that students end up graduating in something that they didn't actually want to do.
Right.
And it's way better to make a decision that I need skills and I need to move those into an area that actually applies to me. Too many of us end up graduating and then we never work in a field related to our major. In fact, the Federal Reserve of New York has done a longitudinal study that has shown that less than 27% of four-year college graduates will ever work in their major. Well, that's really tragic. And to Mallory's point, it's way better to explore that early. Try to get as much of that experience as you can, so that then you're changing your major and getting real skills in an area that will benefit you and your career for the rest of your life, rather than being in the 80+% of people who don't really know what they were meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think you mentioned that earlier too, Mallory, trying internships, summer programs. There's so many things that high school students can do for that exposure. And I think a lot of times we have a lot of beliefs that an internship needs to be my entire summer. It does not. You can just try something for a couple days or a job shadow. So there's a lot of ways to understand different types of careers and jobs. And it's, such a light bulb goes on for a lot of high school students to say, I did not enjoy that, internship in the hospital. I want nothing to do. Like you said, Mallory, I don't like blood and guts.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of moving back to assessments, as, I think sometimes there's a lot of conversation out there is, when is the best time for a student to take an assessment? Can they take it again? If they take it their 10th grade year, can they take it again their senior year? When they come to you, Mallory, at University of Iowa, should they be taking it again to see if their aptitudes change? Edson, can you talk about that a little bit? And then Mallory, maybe follow up with, what kind of things do you see for students that maybe have taken assessments, and how can you guide them with newer assessments to identify aptitudes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the first thing is that aptitudes and interests are very different. And the vast, vast majority of guidance tools that have been used to date have been based on interest-based or personality profiles. And the challenge with those, of course, as we've kind of talked, is that interests change. And so these surveys, while they're very, very valid and good tools, but they need to be recognized for what they are and how they're used. So an interest survey will ask you things like, do you like building cabinets, or do you like working with blood, right? And but if you as a student have never done either one of those, then I can't tell you whether I like one of those better or not. And so from an interest perspective, it's really important to take interest surveys over and over and over again, because our interest and our knowledge about who we are and what we like becomes more and better refined the older we get. Aptitudes are unique in this, and this is why they're fairly special in this regard. Aptitudes do change slightly as we're born and as we grow, but after we go through puberty, actually, our aptitudes actually solidify, and they change very, very little from the time that we're in our teenage years all the way through adulthood. Now, the skills that are built on those aptitudes do change, right? We get better at things. We're able to accomplish things in a better, faster way. But those inherent aptitudes actually don't change very much. Now, where I would recommend, and so we don't need to take them over and over again, unless for this one reason. I do recommend that students take them in a middle school kind of framework, because that guides them into these general categories that will help us as counselors and educators help the student understand what classes they should take. They should then, as they've gone through puberty, they should again then take those aptitude tests at that point. Now, the only other time where they really need to take those aptitudes again is if they didn't take the process of those brain games that we put them through seriously. So if they kind of rushed through it and they didn't really take it seriously, then I would say definitely go back and take it again and give it your best shot, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just how do you respond to these brain games? And that would be the only other time to really take those again. But interest, you do want to take those over and over again. Mallory, what do you think?
Right.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think oftentimes I'll work with students who in high school have taken an interest-based assessment, and it's kind of been this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Of like, oh, I want to be a doctor. So then I take this assessment and I answer it kind of how I think a doctor might answer it. And then guess what? It tells me I should be a doctor. And that's not really helpful. So, if a student has taken YouScience, we've been able to learn more about their aptitudes. Instead of thinking about, oh, should you take another assessment or should you take this over again? I would really just like to dig in and reflect on that a little bit more. How did you feel about your results? What are some of the careers that you're drawn to? What are some of the things that you're curious about? What doesn't resonate with you? My results resonate with me deeply. And still, there are some careers that I think, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. And that's okay. So I think instead of trying to look for another assessment or another thing to take, we should just deepen the reflection and personalize it. And again, start to narrow and focus. Let's come up with 10 careers from this page that you're curious about. Okay, now let's come up with 4 that you might want to go job shadow. Great. So we can just simplify the process because there's a lot of information in there. And so we want to help personalize and deepen that reflection.
Yeah, I love that idea of starting early, but continuing and exploring different assessments in the end, they're probably very similar, but I do have a question I see on here that I'm very curious about too. Can we talk a little bit about reliability? I know there's a lot of high schools that use various assessments, and then we have, certain assessments out there like the Career Search and RIASIC and Holland's Co. There's just so many assessments out there. So how do we educate everyone here tonight to understand which ones are reliable? Should they take the same types of assessments? Like what are you as professionals in the assessment world? What are your thoughts around that?
Go ahead, Mallory.
I think I would just like to differentiate that there's different types of assessments. So some are self-reported and then others are going to be more objective. And so self-reported are those ones where it says, well, do you think you'd like this? Do you think you'd like that? And so you're guessing. And you're guessing based on the experiences that you've had or that you haven't had. Whereas more of an objective assessment, like YouScience, is going to give you more data and less opinion. And so I think it's important to kind of clarify what sort of assessment are you taking. I think what's really exciting about YouScience and the direction that it's headed is just that it's this opportunity to really scale aptitude assessment for the masses. Aptitude assessment has been around for a long time. This is not new or trendy. It's just been really hard to find and really expensive. And so to have the opportunity to take aptitude to scale, it is really exciting, and it is reliable based on decades of aptitude assessment that's been reserved for just the select few.
Yeah, I think too, to add to what Mallory said there, is the research and the validity of all of these different tools, the ones that you mentioned, and there are many more. They're actually very, very valid as a tool. The challenge, like so many tools, is that we misapply the tool to the need. So to use a very simple example, if I was to try to use a hammer to try to screw in a screw, I could maybe do it, but it's not the tool that was intended for that purpose. A screwdriver would be better for that purpose. And so interest profiles and personality profiles and all of those different types of tools, by the way, we use those. So they're not bad. You just have to understand why they're there. And to associate those tools, as Mallory said, you're kind of guessing at what your answers should be. And what happens is you tend to guide your answers based on what you want the outcome to be. So you really have to be very, very self-aware. And of course, as a young person, that's quite hard to do, to say, am I answering this based on what I want it to be? Or am I answering this based on who I really am? And that is it's very hard for us to do that as adults. So let alone a young person that's going through so many changes, so many pressures, so many other things. Some of those tools are just misapplied. And so we just really have to look at what's the purpose of the tool, and is it getting me the outcome that I'm really searching for? That's the better way to look at that. All of them are quite valid. They've been proven and tested. And so they really do have a high source of validity and reliability. But they're not always applied correctly.
And at the end of the day, they're a tool. It's not,
That's right.
no one, even with the best assessment, no one should make an entire life decision on the results of one assessment alone. It is a way to learn more about yourself, to learn more about the world of work, and to use that information as you will. I always tell students, you still know yourself best. I wouldn't lead you to an assessment that I didn't think could be helpful, but you still know yourself best. So I think that's important to note here too, is that we're never encouraging someone to make a career decision exclusively on an assessment.
That's right.
But there are a lot of great resources out there.
Yeah, and I think we can definitely all agree too. And I know of so many situations, how fortunate our students to have a Mallory. And I think assessments are only as good as they're interpreted. And, a lot of students will take an assessment and then never meet with anybody to really unpack results and explain to them, what did these results really mean? And how does that relate to you? And these are your potential, these are your aptitudes that we can identify out of these tools. So that's something I think we could all say, and hopefully the audience can hear too, that if you are utilizing a tool, making sure that you are getting some sort of, breakdown and interpretation, and you have somebody amazing like you, Mallory, to really break down and help someone understand how that relates to them. And I just want to shift a little bit to, Mallory, when working with students and all of us, really, it's truly stressful, really stressful. I think we see so many students, they're so busy in their high school lives and with homework and sports and art and whatever jobs that they might have.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we add this, burden of, it's your responsibility to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. And, that's how they interpret it, that they can't make a college decision or they can't move on from high school till they understand that. Mallory, can you talk a little bit about, your thoughts around self-reflection? We know there's these tools, but what do you say to students as far as just finding space and opportunity to just, self-reflect about their interests or ideas for what's next for them?
Sure. So I love that I have the opportunity to connect with students and to have these conversations, but you don't have to talk to a career coach to still make progress in this process. There are a lot of self-reflection resources that you can explore and look into. And so I really encourage folks to try new things. I mean, take that elective, join that club that you've just been curious about. Now is the time, especially when you're in high school or early in college, now really is the time for breadth, not depth. It's okay to just do a little bit of a lot of different things to explore. I also want folks to really think about what makes you, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you value. That's so important, knowing your personality. So assessments can be a great way to explore this further, as can just conversations with folks that you trust, folks who love you. That can be a good way for you to explore that a little bit more as well. Not that we want other folks to make these decisions for you, but sometimes we have our blind spots on. We don't know the strengths that we possess, but a family member, a friend, a teacher might be able to vocalize some of those for us. I'm a counselor, so of course I'm going to say, notice your feelings. What do you look forward to? What do you dread? What feels, what really drains your energy versus what lights you up? When are those times where you're in the flow? Time is just going really quickly. I want you to have more of that in life. I don't want you to dread Monday because you have to go to work, right? So figuring out, what energizes you is so helpful. It's also helpful to look backwards. What are some past experiences that you've had that have come easy for you or that you're proud of? Are there any common themes with those? And so really thinking also about some better questions, some different questions. What do you want to be when you grow up? And what are you passionate about? Are well-intended questions that aren't that helpful. So really thinking about, who do you want to help? What problems do you want to solve? What do you care about? What motivates you? And I know that this is heavy. I know this can feel like a lot, but I do encourage folks to keep it positive. We really want folks to live in that zone of awesome, instead of a world where everyone's average at everything. Find those things that you feel really great in, and try to keep this light and positive. We don't need to dwell on our weaknesses. We all have those, but focus on your strengths as you're working through this process. You're also never done. So it's not too early to start thinking about it, but this isn't something that's ever going to be crossed off the to-do list. We're human beings. This is a process. It will unfold. And so, be open to that growth and evolution, and take care of yourself along the way, because it's hard to make these important decisions if you're always feeling heightened, if you're always feeling stressed. So try to just think of kind of that one next decision, and take care of yourself in the process.
I love that advice. And I tell students a lot, you're human beings, not human doings. And so maybe we can all promise tonight we're not going to ask a high school student again what they want to be when they grow up.
There's a lot of pressure to that, right? Because you go, you're a senior in high school and everyone says, where are you going to go to school? What are you going to major in? And then you come to college and folks say, what's your name? What are you majoring in? And then you get a job and you go to a networking event and they say, what's your name? What do you do? And so there's so much identity wrapped up in the work that we do. And so that's why we want to give this exploration process the time and energy it deserves, because it does shape kind of our identities in some ways. But we also just need to take a little pressure off ourselves and each other to have it all figured out all the time.
I think if I could add something to that, because I think it's so important to really dive into that aspect of who you are, and not to bring it all the way always back to aptitudes. But one of the things is, if you're thinking of yourself and saying, my aptitudes are idea generation, or numerical reasoning, or those types of things, then when somebody asks you what you do is, well, I generate ideas for a living. And that brings me joy. That actually fulfills me. But I could do that in 20 different industries. I don't have to do that in just one industry. And it's very liberating to do what Mallory said, is really step back, analyze who you are, and then try so many things, because you'll find that you're finding joy in different things, not as related to healthcare or welding or this or that. It's now I'm more robust as a person, and I can do lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. So many things to ponder. I wish I heard these things when I was in high school. Who knows what I'd be doing now? In just respect of time too, I wanted to just remind everybody that we have added some things in the chat for resources, and thank you again, Edson, for the discount for students and parents if you so choose to take the YouScience. But just as we close tonight's first career event, I'm curious what each of you would tell yourself, your high school self. What message do you wish you would have heard, knowing what you know now as career experts?
Mallory, you want to go first?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, there's both so much that I'd want to tell myself, and also I don't know if I'd change anything, because that's how you figure it out. And so I don't know if I'd have this sage advice that I could tell myself. I do wish that I would have known about my aptitudes when I was younger. When I took YouScience years ago, I got my results and found out that I have a lot of innate potential with STEM careers that I hadn't considered. And while that wouldn't have been the right fit for me now, I love what I do. I wouldn't necessarily want to change, but it was never valid. Like, I never got that support. I have a very loving family. They always wanted me to do my best, but no one ever really shined a light on that potential that I had to offer. I didn't know any, female scientists or female engineers where I grew up. So I think it's just nice to know all of your options and to feel really empowered in those options, rather than kind of those fields that society or, your environment encourages you to consider. So certainly, if I could have had that information just to feel more empowered, I would have loved that. Probably would have saved me some stress freshman year when I was exploring and changing my major all the time. But I also feel like, not to sound cliche, but it really does all unfold the way it's supposed to. And That's what makes me passionate about this work.
Right.
Great
advice.
Yeah, I think that is great advice. I think if I would look back, I would have. I like the way that Mallory said a couple of things there, and in particular, really looking at what are my strengths and how do I apply those strengths, and looking at our strengths in different ways. If I could, I'll share the advice that I would have given myself, because I gave it to my daughter and she actually shared a story with me when we were really looking at the aptitudes, and she went through it as a high school student. And we talked about her results a little bit, and then she kind of put them away. My daughter, my oldest daughter, she is like the most loving, kind person I know. I mean, she's just that caring individual. And because of that, throughout her entire life, we always said, "Oh, you'll be so great working with people. You'll be so great at taking care of individuals." And so as she grew up, she internalized that a lot. And so when it came time to start choosing some of her career choices in high school, and then moving into college, she started thinking of occupational therapy or different types of patient care. And she got into some of those fields. Luckily, she did do exploratory. She helped a Down syndrome girl through her high school years, and through that, she found a lot of joy there. But she felt like something was missing. After going through the aptitude, she and I didn't talk quite a bit about this, unfortunately. But she got into college and she started going down a track. And luckily, she was required to take a class in information systems, and something from a perspective very different than patient care. And she came to me about halfway through that class and she said, "Dad, I'm so embarrassed, because when I took the aptitude assessments, one of my first recommendations was actually an information systems engineer." And she said, I always get kind of emotional. She said to herself, "Dad, that wasn't me. I told myself that wasn't me. It was my older brother who, was this persona of computer, nerdiness in her mind, right?" And so she had separated herself from that potential career. And yet when she got into that class, she said, "Dad, that was my favorite class I've ever taken." And so now she's in information systems. I'm sorry I get so emotional, but it's so personal because she sees she just comes alive now.
Mm-hmm.
She comes home from every class, every semester, and she's just like, "I love what I'm doing." And now the way she's looking at that is she's saying, "How do I now take what I've learned in information systems?" She's in her master's program now. And she's saying, "How can now I apply that to the field that I was actually interested in before, which is personal care?" And so now she's blending two worlds together that she never would have considered. And as a father, knowing that you had guided somebody unintentionally down a path that wasn't necessarily their best path really hit home to me how important what Mallory talked about, by exploring things and really finding who you really are, and then working towards that. That's your best. That's the best advice I could give my former self and every student going forward.
Right. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I just love that message and reminder for us all here tonight that it's really just about supporting each other and allowing exploration and mistakes and, trying things and hopefully, throughout the various career sequences that CGN's going to offer, you'll learn more about what's out there in the world of work and how that aligns to your aptitudes. And ultimately, we all do land in places that we love eventually. So just remembering that. So thank you both so much for your expertise and heartfelt messages as we all pave our journeys in our career. And please don't forget our 2 upcoming episodes in our 3-part series. November 3rd, we'll be talking again about skills. and the Future of Work with Michelle Wise, author of the book Long Life Learning, Preparing for Jobs That Don't Even Exist Yet. That's going to be fantastic. And Shelley Tome, career counselor and director of exceptional students services at Western Maricopa Education Center. And then again on December 1st, we'll focus on jobs and how to find role models and envision your dream job. That's what we all want. And our guests for that program are Mike Mariner, co-founder and president of Road Trip Nation, and Linda Calhoun, founder of CEO of CareerGirls.org. As a reminder, we will send out a link to this episode. Feel free to share it wide and far so others can hear the message. We thank you again for attending tonight, and good night to you all.
Thanks for watching CGN Live Career, how you can jumpstart your future now. We'd love to get your feedback about this episode in a brief survey. By filling out the survey, you'll have the chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. All students and their families should have access to trusted, high-quality college and career information. That's what CGN School offers. CGN School is the first college and career content platform for high school counseling departments designed to save counselors time, lower parent anxiety, and support students as they navigate the high school to post-secondary transition. In addition to live events like this, you'll get expert-led live seminars, highly curated video playlists, and specialized modules for students with learning differences, athletic recruits, and much more. CGN School also offers programming for counselors to enhance their professional development. We hope that counselors in our audience tonight will go to collegeguidancenetwork.com to request a demo. Please join us on Wednesday, October 12th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for CGN Spotlight, the best rankings webinar ever. We'll discuss when rankings can be helpful and when they should be avoided, as well as provide you with resources and data that you can use instead of rankings. Our next CGN Live college program is Straight Talk with Admission Leaders. We'll have admissions directors from schools big and small, The Ohio State University and Carleton College, to answer your questions on the college admissions process. That's Thursday, October 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And CGN Live Career will be back on Thursday, November 3rd at 7:30 p.m. Eastern with Skills for Your Future. A look at the skills you'll need in the workforce and where you can find opportunities to develop those skills. For details on those programs and to register, go to collegeguidancenetwork.com. Thanks again for watching and have a good night.